If you like the sweet science, get ready to talk boxing on the Gloved Fist podcast with top boxing writers Frank Lotierzo and Jack Hirsch. Frank, a former amateur boxer out of Philadelphia, writes for NY Fights and can be seen on the Boxing Channel. Jack, an amateur boxer who competed in the New York Golden Gloves, was a 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association. And now, here's Frank Lotierzo and Jack Hirsch.
Good evening, and we're back. Welcome to Glove Fist. We're on a 2-week hiatus. Jack, the last time we got together was May 23rd. For the record, my name is Frank Lotierzo, full-time observer, part-time writer, and former fighter. How's that for a change-up, Jack? And I am joined by Mr. 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association of America, Jack Hirsch. Jack, it's been a few weeks since we've been together, and boy, has there been a lot happen. But before we touch on any of that, I just saw that the Jermell Charlo fight has been postponed. With Saluki,
okay. Yeah,
he hurt his back training, and the whole card is it's postponed, and they're going to put it together for a later date. So that's one I was looking forward to because Jermell never fights.
All right, that's the first time I'm hearing that, Frank. But that's not one of the marquee matchups. I don't know, could we find anyone who would pick Charlo to actually lose that fight?
No, I want to see Charlo fight. You know, at one time I was a bigger fan of Jermell than I was Jermell. But you know what, Jack, as we've talked about before, Jermell has cleaned out the division, and nobody can say anything negative about him. He's been spectacular in rematches, and he's fought everybody out there in 154.
Jamal with an A was supposed to fight Jaime Munguia. Jaime Munguia is boxing this weekend. You know, the fight that he should win, but that would have been an intriguing matchup. Jamal Charlo against Jaime Munguia. I would have liked Charlo in that fight had it taken place.
Me too.
Golden Boy Promotions and Al Heyman were having discussions about the possibility of making the fight happen, but it's so hard for these promotional groups to get together. The only time these promotional entities really get together is when their fighter has no other alternative, so the money is so lucrative, they're finally willing to take that chance of their guy getting knocked off.
Another fight regarding Charlo is Jermell. I saw the WBO ordered him to defend against your guy, Tim Tszyu. And I think that's probably going to come off. And I hope you pick Tim Tszyu.
I'm going to wait and I'm going to see. I'm going to reserve judgment on that, believe it or not. And I'm not Tim Tszyu's problem is he's big, he's strong, he's powerful, he's fundamentally sound, but he's slow.
And he's there to be hit. He doesn't have an imaginative offense, and Jermell can box and punch.
But he keeps the pressure on all fight. And, you know, and if he could get Charlo on the ropes and keep him there for long stretches, he absolutely could, you know, come away with a decision. But I'm going to reserve judgment.
Okay.
Charlo surprised me against Castano, you know, in the rematch. So I'm not an authority with Jermell Charlo. But as is often the case when we pick against the guy, Frank, one fight and he fools us, we tend to pick him in the next fight because we don't want to make the same mistake twice. And then, you know, but then if he loses, we're going to say, you know, I should have, you know, went with.
I think, Jack, Tszyu is made for Charlo. I'll just say that. And I think, and we can talk about a fight that happened this week, which was the fight between not Tank Davis, Haney and Kambosa. And what you were touching on.
You should have started out with, why are you with the Charlos? I know you're intrigued with the Charlos, but we should.
No, Jermell.
Okay, Jermell, but we should have started this show with Haney and Kambosos. That was
all right. Let's go. Let's go. I'll throw out my quick take.
Frank, I read your post. You were very impressed with Haney.
I thought he fought an excellent fight, but remember, I said I always thought that we kind of overrated Kambosos off of the Lopez fight. I think Lopez messed up after he beat Lomachenko. He was out of the ring too long. He lost focus. He was concentrating on so many things, trying to make himself a big brand. I think he took his eye off the ball. He loses to Kambosos, and I think we overrated Kambosos off of that. Did Haney set the world on fire? I think he fought an outstanding fight. I think his future looks very bright. He's the undisputed champ at lightweight right now. I'm not sure he's the best lightweight in the world, but he is in the mix and has to be addressed regardless of who we're going to talk about.
I'm not sure what to make of Devin Haney. When I saw him on the way up, Frank, I thought he was going to be a generational talent along the lines of Pernell Whitaker. Okay, his style was a little different from Whitaker, but I thought he'd be of that caliber. By the time his career would be done, we'd rate him the way we rate Pernell Whitaker, very highly, of course. And then seeing him afterwards, I kind of cooled off on him a little bit, and I'm just not sure what to make out of him. He's very good, obviously, but just the idea that we're saying, well, we're not sure whether he's the best lightweight in the world. We're not sure whether he's better than Tank Davis. We're not sure whether he's better than Ryan Garcia. You know, just the idea that we have some doubt there, okay, some real doubt, tells us the jury's still out on Haney. Haney did what he had to do. You can't blame him for that. He didn't look that he was extremely effective, but he wasn't electrifying like a Sugar Ray Leonard, putting combinations together and dazzling. He kept spearing Kambosos with jabs on the way in, with a follow-up hook, a follow-up punch. He controlled the action, okay?
Jack, but that's big. I mean, if we're going to compare everybody to Sugar Ray Leonard, nobody's going to be any good. I thought Haney fought a very, very smart, cerebral fight. He kept Kambosos from getting in close. He kept him from trading hooks and uppercuts. He would hit him with the jab to the body. He picked his shots real good. I would have liked to have seen him be a little bit busier, but he got by with the 1-2. And then and the fact that we can't say he's without a doubt the best guy in the lightweight division. Why, Jack? You know why? Because the division is very stacked. The division is very stacked. I can't see who the best guy is.
Frank, but you said it best. He got by with the 1-2. I wanted to see 3, 4, and 5. We weren't seeing that with Haney. He was effective. He was winning rounds, but he wasn't looking like a special fighter. That's the point. He fought an excellent fight, but then again, look, Tank Davis the week before, he didn't look that good against Riley Romero. You know, he landed the last punch, the left hook stopped Romero. So we got all excited. The Barclays Center was sold out. They had very good pay-per-view numbers for a show like that, 275,000, which is a tribute to Tank, especially going forward. You know how marketable he's going to be. But on balance, we didn't see a dominating performance from Tank Davis.
Jack, but you're supposed to win. Tank was in there with a guy that made him look like a bantamweight. The size difference was obvious. And I give Tank credit for the fact that he fought a smart fight. He waited for Romero to wind down. He got him walking towards him so he could counter him. Instead of being like a little Joe Frazier and forcing the action, he boxed. He made Romero reach and lunge, and he countered him. He set him up beautiful for that second shot when he threw those 2 right hands. And I'm going to give Tank credit for the fact that he's showing that he is more than just a puncher. He can box, and he can go inside and outside. I mean, Sugar Ray Leonard, as much as I love him, Jack, he didn't look great against Larry Bonds. He didn't look great against Marcus Geraldo, against guys like that were a little bigger than him. So they're not always going to have his signature fight, Jack. And how many guys put signature fights together in a career, let alone back-to-back? So I think Tank looked really good. I'm not going to say he's the best lightweight in the world because I still have questions if he's really a lightweight because those guys are really big. But I think Tank is one hell of a fighter. He's more than a puncher, and he showed that he's cerebral, and he can box, and he's strategically smart.
And he's staying with Mayweather Promotions, he said.
I saw that.
How is that going to help his career, Frank? What do you think of that move?
I think to a degree he wants Floyd to do with him what he did with himself, to try to manage him with the high reward, low risk fights. But he's getting to the point now where he's creeping up, and the level of opposition is getting better. And now Garcia's back in the mix. maybe we can see
I don't
that.
think
But
he's fighting Ryan Garcia. First off, you see Leonard Ellaby at ringside. Leonard Ellaby is a nice man. Let me go on record for saying he's a nice man, but Leonard Ellaby has no say on what's going on with Tank's career. He just represents Mayweather at these press conferences. Okay, that's all there is to it. So I don't want to hear what Leonard Ellaby has to say because we're hearing, well, Garcia doesn't want to fight this and that. Of course, Garcia wants to fight Tank, and Tank would gladly fight Garcia, but will he be allowed to if they're following the Floyd Mayweather formula? Listen,
they probably won't.
About it, but you want to know something? If it's going to make Tank a fortune of money and his career is going to be 70% as lucrative as Mayweather's, then Mayweather would have done a great job promoting him. Because isn't the idea make the guy as much money as you can? And you can also build a legacy, even though you hate this, Frank, by just winning. Even though the opposition might not be great, you don't like Floyd Mayweather's level of opposition throughout his career for the most part. And I don't want to discuss, and I don't want to get into detail on that. But the point is, Mayweather did build a great legacy in the minds of a lot of people, not for yourself, and not for some others, but a lot of people. He built that great legacy, and maybe that's what happens with Tank. We want to see him in there with Ryan Garcia or Devin Haney, but Devin Haney's going to have to rematch with Kambosos. Frank, can you see the fight being any different at all, a rematch?
Kambosos and Haney? No, I think Haney wins by even more because I think he'll draw from the experience. He will get better. As Joe Bergman said, Kambosos didn't fight with any urgency. I think Haney's jab and right hand had a lot to do with that. And regarding Tank, this is what I think is going to happen with him. Yes, the Mayweather template, he will wait. And I think to follow the Mayweather template, I think the guy that they want to fight is Lomachenko. But I think they want to push it out and let it go further out because I think Floyd likes to fight guys when he's at his best and they're on the decline. Lomachenko is not quite the great fighter he was 2 or 3 years ago. We don't know when he's going to fight again. They're talking about maybe he's going to fight Haney later this year. That might happen. And if Lomachenko wins, now we're a year out. And then maybe I think he'll take a chance with Tank fighting Lomachenko for 2 reasons. Lomachenko's getting up there in age, and he's the smallest of the lightweight guys of that lot. And I think they like that.
We're talking like, for the listeners, if it seems like we're bouncing around from fighter to fighter, we're talking the lightweight division now. All these guys in the lightweight division. You mentioned a good point with Lomachenko. Lomachenko is in the battlefield now, at least defending in Ukraine. How seriously can he be training in the meantime? And an older fighter like him, layoffs like this basically are career enders in a sense. So it's it starts a fighter's decline when he's older and he's forced to be off. Lomachenko, you have to consider this, is very closely affiliated with Bob Arum's Top Rank. They do business with Lomachenko's manager, Igor Klimas. So I doubt that Lomachenko would do business with Tank Davis. But if Haney wins the rematch with Kambosos, which he should do, I can see Haney and Lomachenko being the big fight for sure. Okay, because that'll be easy to make. And Haney would have had the belts, at least more of the belts. And I think that would be more of an intriguing fight for the Lomachenko side. So if Lomachenko is going to come back, I think it would be Devin Haney. And Devin Haney would know, too, after beating Kambosos a second time, if I want to become a megastar, not just a star in boxing, a megastar, let me beat Lomachenko, okay? Because that's the big name on the record.
I agree with that, Jack. And without seeing Lomachenko right now, I would have a hard time, other than Shakur Stevenson, picking anyone to beat him. But I do think that we still will see a Lomachenko-Davis fight down the road because I think Floyd has his eyes on that. I think he's watching the calendar. And I also think that he will take advantage of Lomachenko's willingness to fight the best on a given night. So I think that even if down the road, Lomachenko has a title. Maybe he's beaten Haney. He's made a defense. I think we'll see Davis and Lomachenko fight in a big fight before Lomachenko retires. And I hate to say this, but I think there's a chance we may not see Davis in a big fight against one of these guys, these upper tier lightweights, until that point. But as I've said, and I think you agree with me before, the way things are in the welterweight division, it is a little bit like the Hagler, Hearns, Duran.
You mean lightweight?
In the lightweight divisions. It's sort of the way it was with the Four Kings back in the 80s, where I think that if they fight each other, none of them will go undefeated, but there'll be good fights and there'll be great fights and it'll carry the sport. But I don't think any of those guys right now would go undefeated against the field.
Yeah, it's intriguing, but it makes it a lot of fun. And the thing about it, too, with all the extra weight classes you have in boxing today, I mean, guys can move up and down. In a certain sense, they can avoid one another. It's kind of like checkers. You move up one spot, you move down a spot. You look for fighters who are marketable, opponents who could be marketable, who give you the less risk. That's why Rolly Romero, the fight was appealing. I mean, Rolly Romero, for all his talk, it was entertainment to people. And Tank Davis's stock, had went up going into the fight. And Rolly Romero was the perfect foil for promoting that fight.
And he's a big, awkward guy at that weight who can punch. And that is a problem for guys that are more conventional. So you could see why he was in the fight basically until the end.
I want to see Isaac Cruz fight Rolly Romero next. The two guys Tank beat. That would be a heck of a good fight.
I haven't thought about that. I don't know who I picked there.
And the winner of that fight, if the two of them fought, would be entitled to, go in with one of the top guys. Legitimately.
I agree, Jack. I agree with Pone Kingpatch because I do think that Davis does not need Garcia, where Davis is starting to show that he is a little bit of a draw and can carry a card by himself. Ryan Garcia, I don't think is at that point yet, although I see De La Hoya is all over social media trying to push that fight. But I think business will get in the way of that fight because De La Hoya will not accept the fact that his guy is going to take the smaller piece of the pie.
Mayweather doesn't like De La Hoya. De La Hoya doesn't like
him.
So they're not doing business. That fight, I don't give serious consideration to it taking place, at least for quite some time. You never know down the road if both guys continue.
Well, like you said at the beginning of the show, if the money's there, the enemies will get together.
Who is going to promote it? I mean, Mayweather's not going to put up the money, that type of money. De La Hoya's not. It's just not happening. I mean, for all the good talk, and it's a good matchup. Look, before that, we heard a year ago Devin Haney and Ryan Garcia going at it. Now we heard, Teofimo Lopez, who moved up to junior welterweight. I mean, the pieces go back and forth, but at the end of the day, the guys have to fight someone, and they have to fight someone who's marketable. And, and there's such a thing as you eventually run out of opponents.
And, Jack, I'll say this about Haney, what I really like about him. And there are things about him I don't like. And again, I don't think he's an all-time great, all-world talent. I do think he can be outstanding. But the fact that he took that fight against all those odds and he went there, and you could tell they tried to mess with him. They tried to mess with his corner. They tried to disrupt that. They were smart to get judges that weren't biased. But I really don't like the fact that we have to watch a rematch. I know that's what he had to do to get the fight, but nobody wants to see that.
There were worse fights than a rematch. Look, it's Kambosos' first defeat. In a certain sense, you can't begrudge him getting another opportunity.
No, Jack, it was smart business. He did the right thing. He covered his rear end.
He's coming out now saying he thinks he won the fight.
Well, then Haney hit harder than I thought. I saw that. Then Haney hit him harder than I thought, if he thinks that.
I mean, someone should tell Kambosos, when you start talking like that, you sound foolish.
That was a no-show by Kambosos. As good as Haney was, Kambosos, really, he was wild. He was exposed for all the flaws that he had. and Haney picked him apart and really did. He won. I gave him 10 rounds. I thought he won 10-2 going away.
Can Kambosos do anything different to get him in the fight, to give him a shot?
Jack Kambosos can only fight one way. He has to bring it. Okay, so all he can do in a rematch is try to bring more of what didn't work the first time. And I believe Haney will be bigger, stronger, more confident. And I don't see any way Kambosos wins. He just doesn't have the tools.
I see an exact repeat. Haney outpointing him basically the same way the second time around. Over this weekend, right before the Haney-Kambosos fight, there was an outstanding matchup that was on Showtime, okay? For 122-pound title, a super bantamweight title, Stephen Fulton from Philadelphia, your neck of the woods.
Yep.
Okay? Going against Danny Roman. I'm going to tell you something. Fulton looked outstanding.
Best fight of his career, Jack.
I could make the argument based on this performance. And Frank, I'm not quite making the argument, but I can make it, and it could be a credible argument, that Stephen Fulton right now is the best fight in Philadelphia. And I haven't forgotten Boots Ennis. That's how good Stephen Fulton looked. Now, I'm not saying that's the case, but I can make a legitimate argument.
Wait a second, though. You are making the case.
He was magnificent.
You are making the case.
He fought a mother. Listen, Boots Ennis has never fought a guy nearly as good as Daniel Roman. Not nearly as good Boots Ennis throughout his career. He fought Stephen Fulton, a class fighter, former champion who had a few title defenses. And when Roman lost his title, I was at ringside in Miami. He lost a very tight decision in a great fight. Daniel Roman is a heck of a fighter, yet Stephen Fulton dominated him. He showed all type of moves, moving left, right. Daniel Roman couldn't get him on the ropes.
That was his signature fight, Joe. I saw it. I mean, Jack, he was on point with everything he did. It was a perfect fight from A to B, but I am not going to agree with you. I think Boots Ennis.
Him, Joe Bergman, isn't it about time Fulton got recognized? Fulton made a believer.
That'll start now, Joe.
Made a believer out of me starting now.
Yep.
I mean, Stephen Fulton, you can make an argument based on this performance. He conceivably cracked the top 10 pound for pound listings, conceivably.
Jack, you're really quick on that top 10 pound for pound. You have Stevenson in there. Now you have Fulton in there. You are a prisoner of the moment, but yet the best prospect in boxing, you already have him as the second best guy in the city.
Your top 10 pound for pound is like rent control. You can't move guys. You never want to move guys out of there like Gennady Golovkin. He's probably in your top 10 pound for pound.
Jack, you know what? I don't really have a top 10. I don't like doing that because it's like water and it fluctuates. All I'll say is this. Terrence Crawford, until he is defeated, is the best fighter in boxing in any weight class, in my opinion. Okay? We could talk about resumes, and resumes can be picked apart from now until the cows come home. But Crawford, to me, is the most versatile fighter with the least weaknesses of any fighter in the division. However, I think Boots is on his tail, and I also believe that Boots is such a prospect and formidable fighter that I know you agree, but he's going to cause the biggest fight in boxing to be made this year.
I'm going to tell you, Boots is outstanding. I couldn't tell you with any degree of confidence that Crawford or Spence could beat Boots. I mean, if the three of them had a round robin, my money might be on Boots. Okay, I'd have to analyze him against Crawford. Really, really analyze it. But with Boots Ennis, it's more on potential. He has looked great in his fights. He's looked as good as could be. But my point I'm trying to make with Stephen Fulton beat a world-class fighter in Daniel.
I agree.
And Boots Ennis never did it. Stephen Fulton took the leap up, okay? Listen, but working against Stephen Fulton is this. He barely got by Brandon Figueroa the fight before, and no one is going to hold Boots that close unless it's a Crawford or maybe a Spence, okay? So that would be
but my opinion is based on what I see down the road and potential. Because when Sugar Ray Leonard fought Armando Muniz, that was a good win, but it was an old Muniz. But I could tell by watching him that this was a special fighter who was going to make a big impact on the sport. I see Boots, Jack, I see Boots as the same way. And to what you just said about him fighting Crawford and Spence, if Boots signed to fight Spence tonight, I would pick Boots to beat Spence without any trouble. However, as of now, if they fought in their next fight, I would take Crawford to beat him, but that could change at any time. But if they fought next, I would take Crawford because of the experience and because I think he has a hardness and he's faced adversity that Boots has not faced yet. But I think Boots would beat Spence tonight.
You're ducking the Stephen Fulton issue. You're not. It seems like
I like Stephen Fulton. I do. But you're pushing me to be the devil's advocate because you already have him top 10.
No. I said you could make an argument that he cracked the top 10.
Well, it sounds to me that you are making the argument that he is.
I'm going to tell you, he looked so good against them.
He was, Jack, I totally agree.
Daniel Roman was soundly beaten by a mile, and Daniel Roman fought a good fight. That's the thing about it. I agree. A very good fight, but Stephen Fulton was so magnificent. He didn't allow himself to get caught on the ropes. He counted, he jabbed, he boxed, he moved, and then at the end of the fight, he was walking Roman down. Roman was lucky to last the distance.
I agree. I like him. I like him a lot, Jack. What do you want me to say? I don't think he's top 10. I think he has a bright future, and he may be the best at Bantam. There's no doubt about that. But there was another guy who fought Saturday night that looked pretty good, too, and that was Jason Maloney.
Jason Maloney, the quick KO. Oh, tomorrow, Frank. Oh, a little preview. I think we're both picking the same guy. Inouye against Donaire, the rematch.
Yes.
Last time it was actually the fight of the year in 2019. What a fight. And Donaire came up with an unexpected great effort. And we thought, I should say we, I don't know what you were thinking. I thought, at least in a sense, that punctured the invincibility Inouye was showing. But after the Donaire fight, Inouye went back to totally dominating his guys again. Now, he deserved the decision over Donaire in that first fight. But the idea that Donaire could run him close the way he did, and it was such an exciting, thrilling fight, you wondered what it did to Inouye. You wondered whether Inouye really was a special fighter, but he's showing he is. But he has a rematch with Donaire tomorrow, and very early in the morning, because it's in Japan.
Jack, I think Inouye wins in a dominant fashion. I think he wins by stoppage. I think Donaire was a little lucky last time. I love his skill, his power.
Lucky?
He's been good.
What do you mean lucky? It went 12 rounds. Where was the luck?
I think he fought over his head a little bit in that fight, is what I meant to say. Okay, I don't think that was a true indication. I think we're going to see the difference between them tomorrow morning. Again, Donaire's skill and power, I like. 3 divisions he's dominated, but Father Time is calling him, and I just don't think he can hurt Inouye. Where on the other hand, Inouye is in the midst of his prime. His confidence is soaring. He can still improve. He can go to the body. He started doing that at the end of the first fight. He's more than an attacker. He sets his punches up. He's deceptive. And I think Inouye's going to walk away. Inouye is going to win the fight pretty conclusively, and I don't think it'll go the distance.
This weekend is the Hall of Fame inductions in Canastota. The reason I mentioned that Donaire, let's say he gets stopped in this fight.
He's in the Hall of Fame either way.
A Hall of Famer to you.
Absolutely.
You think it's clear cut without a doubt?
He was dominant, 3 or 4 divisions, 42-6 with 38 knockouts or whatever he is. Yes. And he was overshadowed by Pacquiao. He's one of the best Philippine fighters ever. I have no doubt that he's in. In fact, I would put him in and throw some other guys out, which we've talked about.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's one thing about the International Boxing Hall of Fame, what we don't consider, we sometimes tend to look at it from an American viewpoint. And you mentioned something that's really that more people should think of. Next to Pacquiao, maybe he's the second greatest Filipino fighter of all time. But, you had Pancho Villa, you had Flash Elordi, you had guys like that. One of the greatest Filipino fighters in history. That's safe to say. And it's a worldwide sport, so we got to consider what he meant.
And Jack, here's the other thing too. Donairi's 39. He's well past his prime. If he competes and loses, that's still big for him. Nobody thought he was going to compete the last time. So yes, he should. If he loses his fight, they should march him right to the Hall of Fame, and that should be it. I think he'll retire, Joe. I hope that he does. And if he loses conclusively, he probably will, and that'll be a good way to go out. The fact that he gave the guy his toughest fight. He's the best guy that Inouye's fought to date, and I think Inouye's going to take that into the fight, draw off of that, and win conclusively.
Well, let me throw this by you. We both know Donaire can punch like a mule, okay? Let's say Donaire nails Inouye and knocks him out at some point, because Inouye doesn't want to win on points, so he's going to be bringing it at certain points.
But he can box.
Does Donaire become the next George Foreman, continue on and on and on, and be with us at age 44, 45? And speaking of longevity, okay, tell us, Frank, a spotlight fight of the week.
Bernard the Executioner Hopkins. Former middleweight and light heavyweight champion, 55-8-2. His career spanned basically from 1991 through when did he retire? 2016 or 2017 when Joe Smith beat him. Hopkins, to me, Jack, is one of the most fascinating all-time great fighters ever, and here's why. Here's a guy that got in trouble young, went to prison for armed robbery. He was such a model prisoner that he got out earlier than any other prisoner was ever released. He boxed in the prison. He could not go to the Olympics. He had about 95 amateur fights. He won 90 of them. He came out. He was a light heavyweight in his pro debut. He lost to Clinton Mitchell. Didn't fight for almost 2 years. Came back. And then he went on a run, and almost an unparalleled run, where he fought for the middleweight title with Mercado, drew, then beat him. Then he fights Roy Jones when Roy is in his prime, when Roy hadn't lost a round as a pro. Hopkins wins 4 of the 12 rounds against Roy, lost 8 of the 12, but the fact that he won 4 was pretty big. Then he gets another shot at the title against Mercado, wins it, makes 20 defenses, and here's the thing that I respect about Hopkins, Jack.
Mercado from Ecuador, yeah.
Right. Jack, here's the thing about Hopkins. He had no backing behind him. He had a style that wasn't very appeasing to people that weren't boxing fans. He didn't have the Pepsodent smile. He wasn't a great speaker, but he was smart. He studied the game. He never was out of shape. And he knew the boxing establishment was always trying to get him knocked off because they couldn't control him. And once he broke away from Butch Lewis, he pretty much managed himself. And then he hooked up with DiBella. And DiBella basically got him knocked off in 2 fights with Jermaine Taylor. I thought Hopkins won the first.
No, DiBella wasn't with him at that time when he fought
Jermaine Taylor. But DiBella's guy ended up taking the title from him. Then he moves up and he beats Tarver. The guy is just unbelievable. He could shut down any style. He was tough. He never was out of shape, Jack. I remember he went over 20 years and he didn't eat a cookie. He knew that winning was important. He could adjust to any style. He was junkyard tough. And I think Hopkins is probably among the top 10 greatest middleweights of all time.
Well, I'll tell you, Max Kellerman said it best. He said, Father Time's unbeaten. If you look at Father Time's record, Father Time is undefeated. Except he has a draw against Hopkins, Father Time, because Hopkins' legacy is he fought to such an old age and to the late 40s and effectively. And he would get these big wins in his 40s over, Kelly Pavlik, who was riding high, as middleweight champ. And
he beat Tarver after losing to Taylor.
And Antonio Tarver, when
he dominated him.
No, the two Taylor fights, I thought, even though Taylor got both decisions, I thought Hopkins edged the second fight, the rematch. The first fight, I thought Taylor won because Hopkins got off to a slow start. Hopkins came on and won the last 4 rounds, in my view, but lost 7 of the first 8. It was a question. He was leery of Taylor's power. So I'll
tell you a funny story about Hopkins between the first and the second fight. I was writing for the Sweet Science End, and I was covering Hopkins, but I didn't know how to get in touch with him. So Bernard Fernandez set it up for me to get in touch with him. We were on the phone for 3 hours, and I said to him, now this is 2 months before he fights Taylor in the rematch. And he said, Frank, he said, I messed up. I let Taylor get out to a big lead, and I left it where the judges could determine if I won or lost. And I said, Bernard, I don't believe that. I believe that early in the fight, Taylor was a little too quick and fresh for you, and you had to wait for him to wind down a little bit before you could go get him. He said, no, he goes, that's not true. I kind of gave that to him in the beginning of the fight. I said, well, I'll tell you what. Let's see this time, because you can't do it this time. And what happened, Jack? The exact same thing. Taylor got out to a big lead. Hopkins came on at the end, but he didn't close it enough. And I just think Taylor was the Hopkins, what Ken Norton was the Ali.
Who did you think won the rematch? Because I had Hopkins winning the rematch, eking it out.
I had it a draw.
Okay.
I had it 6-6.
There's so many. We both know Hopkins, and they're like funny stories with Bernard Hopkins. I told the one when he was in Las Vegas at the boxing writers dinner, and a fan came up to him to ask him to autograph a glove, and he said, I'll autograph this glove if you give me $20. Fan gave him $20. He signed it, and he said, now, when you sell this glove that was signed by the undisputed world middleweight champion, you're going to make a lot more than the $20 you just gave me.
Did he keep the $20?
He kept the 20. He pocketed. It wasn't the 20 with Bernard in itself. He loves doing business. The idea he was wheeling and dealing brought him a lot of joy.
Jack, how many guys like Hopkins actually made money, more money, the older they got? And he never was promoted. He was never the guy next door. And that's what I like about him, because Hopkins understood the game, and he knew that as long as I win, I will have say over this middleweight division, and that was the case. And then when he took it up to light heavyweight, he basically had another 8-9 year run at light heavyweight. And I will say this, in the biggest fight of his career against Felix Trinidad, that Bernard Hopkins, I would put up against any middleweight in the world. Do I think he beats Monzon? No. Do I think he beats Robinson? No. Do I think he beats Greb? No. He probably doesn't beat Hagler, but I'll tell you what, he is in the fight from start to finish all the way.
There was talk at one point, serious talk, it didn't quite happen, of James Toney fighting Hopkins. And this is when Toney was basically in his prime. Okay, so that fight never came up. That would have been intriguing. I got to tell you another funny
Hopkins would have beat Toney at middleweight.
There's I'd have
Tony had stinkers, Jack. Tony's best fights were above cruiserweight and heavyweight when he can outbox slow guys. When he was smaller, middleweight, super middleweight, he wasn't unbeatable like people think. He had some close calls.
That's a good point.
And Hopkins would have slowed it down. Tony couldn't hurt Hopkins. Hopkins couldn't hurt him, but Hopkins would do just enough to keep Tony from getting off, and he'd win 7-5.
Okay.
In my opinion.
Yeah, I could see that.
In my opinion.
For sure. But I got to tell you one more funny Hopkins story. It was in Los Angeles. Okay, I'd gotten to know Hopkins fairly well. And 1 week after he lost to Joe Calzaghe, and I thought the decision was fair. I thought Calzaghe did eke out the
very
fight.
Close fight.
Right, but I thought Calzaghe deserved it. But of course, Bernard being Bernard, he felt he was robbed.
And he had the knockdown.
I had become friendly with Enzo Calzaghe, the father and trainer, Joe Calzaghe, who I was hanging out with. So I see Hopkins at the banquet, and I said, Bernard, Enzo's over there. Be a man. Go over and shake his hand. Because Enzo is willing to shake Hopkins' hand, and be friendly, good fight. And Bernard refused. And he said, Jack, if someone, see the guy over there, he pointed to an imaginary guy and he said, imagine that guy picked your pocket and I told you to go over and shake his hand. Would you do it? That was his way of saying that he was wrapped, but Bernard being Bernard.
Bernard was a very, very hard man. There's no doubt about it. And that's partly what made him a great fighter.
But when you rate Hopkins, I think his ID card is longevity. That's how you rate him. I don't rate him as one of the greatest middleweights of all time based on performance. If you put him against a Carlos Monzon, I think Monzon would rate ahead of him on performance. But I think his longevity, what he's done over his whole career and how long he did it, has to be taken into account. I wouldn't rate him as a fighter over Marvin Hagler at middleweight in peak form. But if you look at Hopkins' long run of success, he outlasted everyone. He outlasted Roy Jones. Who had a greater career, Hopkins or Roy Jones? It's debatable. It's debatable because of Hopkins' longevity.
I think Bernard had the greater career, but Roy was the greater skilled fighter.
Okay, which makes it hard. It's like, what do you like when you rate a guy? You know, that's the point. Speaking of great fights.
Okay. Wait 1 second, though, Jack. I do think we're selling Hopkins a little short as a fighter. I do think he matches up with all the great middleweights. And if you think about it, granted, I would pick Hagler to beat him, and I would definitely pick Monzon to beat him. But how many guys did they fight who he wouldn't beat? Who did Monzon beat that we could say would beat Hopkins? And the same thing with Hagler.
If you ask our buddy Russell Peltz, he'll say, well, Benny Briscoe would have beaten Hopkins.
But we're not asking Russell. We already know that. I know Russell will say that.
This guy, no, I see your point. Your point is well taken. I mean.
And he did move up, and he did beat bigger guys, something that Monzon or Hagler never did, and they were no more natural middleweights than he was. So I got to give Hopkins credit for that. Although Bob Foster and Michael Spinks were there, and Hopkins would have never beat those guys at light heavyweight.
No, he wouldn't have moved up.
But I think as a fighter, Jack, Hopkins brings a lot to the ring, and he's very smart. He knows how to shut you down. He roughs it up. He's a little dirty.
Frank, let's compare him to Derek Jeter. Long, great career the way Jeter had. Jeter's not one of the greatest baseball players per se, but you could say had one of the greatest careers per se. How about
longevity counts, Jack. You're right.
Longevity counts, absolutely.
But I'm not a big baseball fan, but from what I've read and remember, there wasn't anything that Jeter couldn't do.
Yeah, but Hopkins, great career. And listen, if you had a middleweight tournament with all the guys in their peak, I wouldn't be flabbergasted if some way Hopkins came away and won it.
I think he beat any middleweight in the world today.
I think, he could conceivably win an all-time great middleweight tournament. It's conceivable. I don't rule that out.
Well, that's pretty high. I think he's in the top 10, not the top 5. But I think he could live with anybody in the top 5. And if he fought him 4 or 5 times, I could see him getting a win.
Well, he's old school. Hopkins was an old school fighter, too.
Never got out of shape, Jack. And he knew what was important. He studied the old fighters, and he was great at taking away the opponent's strength and making them fight from their weakness.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Anniversary fight. Anniversary fight of the week. What do we have, Frank?
We have the June, and I made a mistake, Mac. I'm sorry. It was June 9th, 1978. The WBC heavyweight title bout between WBC champ Ken Norton and top challenger Larry Holmes. And Jack, as you know, and I'm sure the people listening and watching know, that the title became split after Leon Spinks beat Muhammad Ali for the WBA and WBC titles. When Spinks agreed to give Ali a rematch, the WBC stripped him because Ali was supposed to fight Norton. And when Spinks said, no, I'm not going to fight Norton, because Norton signed a contract to fight the winner, because that's how that fight was made. The winner of Ali Spinks won had to fight and defend the title against Norton. Well, Ali lost, so he had no say. And Spinks basically said, well, let me see what I'm going to do. I'm going to get $500,000 to fight Norton, or I'm going to get $4 million to fight Ali. I'll tell you what, the WBC can keep their title, and I will fight Ali. So Norton got the WBC title without winning a title fight, and he fought Larry Holmes, defended against Larry Holmes in a 15-round classic that Holmes won by 1 point. All three judges scored at 143, 142. 2 had it for Holmes. 1 had it for Norton. I don't think the fight was as close as that. I had Holmes winning that fight 9-6 or 10-5, but it was an outstanding heavyweight fight, the best heavyweight fight since the Thrill in Manila, and it would be hard to think of one that was better. Since then, probably Holyfield Bowe won, and the conclusion down the stretch, the 15th round of Holmes and Norton, that's one of the best heavyweight rounds in history.
And Frank, I think you're insulting them by saying it's one of the best heavyweight rounds in history. It was, to me, the greatest round in boxing history, flat out, because of how late it took place in the 15th round. Okay, we talk about the first round, the Hagler-Hearns, but it was the first round. These guys were going at it in the 15th round like that. Maybe I shouldn't call it the greatest round in boxing history. It did have Dempsey-Firpo, with Dempsey getting knocked out of the ring after knocking Firpo down 7 times. So, so I'd have to analyze it. But at least in my lifetime, it was the greatest single round I ever saw, the way the two of them went at it. I had Holmes up 2 points. I agree with you, Holmes won. I think it was about, the judges for the most part had it right. The 2, I think, who had Holmes just eking it out. I had it 8-6-1, in a rounds basis. I can see.
All right, so you had it 8-6-1, yeah, and I was between 9-6 and 10-5. Arthur McCanny was the guest scorer, like Harold Letterman ended up being for HBO, and he worked the fight with Cosell because it was broadcast by ABC. He did not give Norton 1 round until the 8th, and I agree with that. I thought Holmes got out. I thought his jab dictated the fight, stymied Norton. Norton came on, but the way I saw it, it was 7-0 going into the 8th, and then Norton came on. Maybe Norton won 5 of the last 8.
Frank, I have to cut in. Arthur McCanty Sr. was one of the greatest referees of all time. But he didn't have difficulty scoring fights. Look, this is the same Arthur McCanty who refereed the Joe Frazier-Buster Mathis fight, and at the end of 10 rounds, he had it even.
Yeah, I didn't think that fight was that close either. But I happen to agree with McCanny that day, Jack. I think he was on point in that fight.
Okay,
scoring it.
Opinion there.
I don't see any case for Norton winning that fight.
Last round of that fight, who did he give it to? When they went,
I believe he gave to Norton.
Yeah, well, who did you give it to? Do you remember?
Jack, I forget. I actually think the night of the fight, I gave it to Holmes because I thought he pulled it out in the last 30 seconds. But you could give it either way. It was just an unbelievable fight.
Unbelievable fight. And it was really
and the round.
Reality, the last great moment of Norton's career. And for Holmes, it was truly his coming out party. He became a belt holder that night, and his claim to the title would be solidified a couple of years later when he beat a shell of Muhammad Ali. But it wasn't his fault against Ali. He did what he had to do, and he did a great job in the ring. And at that point of Ali's career, Ali never could have competed with Holmes. At that point. No.
Ali and Holmes fight in 78. Ali wins rounds, but he doesn't win enough, and he loses a decision. And Pone Kingpetch makes a good point. Ali Shaver's the 15th round was close. That was a good one too.
Not
that round. No, I don't think it was as good as Holmes and Norton, but it was very exciting.
It wasn't, because the Ali Shavers 15th round, Shavers took the initiative. Then Ali got him in the corner and kept pounding him. And I thought Johnny Lobianco might stop the fight later.
It was a good two-way round, though, and that was Ali's last signature of greatness.
But it wasn't close to the action of Holmes Norton. At least my opinion. Someone else might differ.
I agree, but it's in the conversation because it was a very exciting round. You know, it's funny, Jack. I went back because I knew we were going to talk about this fight. I went back and watched some of the Holmes Norton fight, and you know, there's a hypothetical fight out there that people talk about, and I just think they're always on the wrong side. And when I watch this fight again, I watched maybe 9 of the 15 rounds, and that is, there are some people, many actually, it's probably a 50-50 split, that think Prime Holmes beats Prime Frazier. And when I went back and I watched that Norton Holmes fight, and I take Norton out and I put Smoking Joe in there, I don't see how Holmes makes it 15 rounds. Not with the Frazier between, say, Jerry Quarry and Ali 1. I don't see Holmes being that guy because Norton had no trouble forcing Holmes to the ropes, no trouble getting him to trade inside, and Frazier, who came in faster, more elusive, would have made Holmes punch down and would have killed his body like Norton never came close to doing. I just see Joe Frazier at his prime beating Larry Holmes, no doubt, and stopping him.
Well, the Frazier, the first Ali fight, I'd agree with. I'm not sure.
Even the one that beat Jimmy Ellis and Quarry.
Holmes was Frazier's sparring partner for a while as he was Ali's. Holmes absolutely loved Joe Frazier.
He
loved
did.
him. And Holmes liked to brag that Joe broke my ribs in sparring. It was like a badge of honor to him.
And Ali gave him his first black eye. He bragged about that too.
But he seemed to have a little resentment towards Ali at times that he never had towards Joe. Because Holmes once said, if Ali calls me up, he needs help, I'll be there in a minute. If Joe calls me up, I'll be there in a second. That was his way of saying, you know, he just loved Joe.
They had the Philly connection. And if you think about it, what is the one thing they both had in common besides being from Philly? They were both over
Pennsylvania. Really.
But it's okay, Pennsylvania. They're both Pennsylvania fighters, Jack. And how far is Easton from Philly? What's it, an hour away? If that. What do they have in common? And what is the one thing they could bond on? They were both ridiculed, mocked, and overshadowed from Ali. And I think that had something to do with them being together.
Ali didn't mock Holmes. I mean, when they signed the fight, he tried to get inside his head a little. But Ali,
Jack, who was Holmes compared to his whole time as champion, where nobody ever gave him respect? Don King went in and said, you know what? People would rather pay to watch Ali sit in front of a TV and watch a fight than they would watch you fight. Holmes always said he couldn't escape the shadow of Ali, and we know that Frazier, after he beat Ali, he still didn't get the credit he deserved, and Ali went around convincing everybody that he really won, not Frazier. So I think that's something that drew them together. They had a common enemy, and they both could say they beat him, and I think they took pleasure in that.
You know, I'll tell you, Ali sold that to a lot of people and convinced them that he really beat Frazier in the first fight. And you kind of wonder, any fighter who keeps going and keeps selling that he won a fight, after a while, if you say it enough time, the people start coming around. Like Kambosos is claiming he beat Devin Haney. As time goes by, some people in Australia are going to believe it.
Jack, Kambosos is not the charismatic figure and personality that Ali was. So I don't think there's any chance that that'll ever go over. And to me, I was 13 when they fought, 12 or 13? To me, even at that time, anyone who listens to Ali's rhetoric or listens to his rhetoric that he beat Frazier the first time, they're either blinded by their bias or they don't know what they're looking at, because in later years, Ali admitted that Frazier beat him the first time, but he couldn't admit it back then. He came back and he said, you know, I landed more punches, and we know that's not true. Joe won the fight, and when the bell rang to end it, Ali knew it.
Yeah. But I'll tell you, but the Holmes Norton fight, just getting back to what a terrific fight. And Holmes did establish himself as an all-time great heavyweight champion. No ifs or buts about it. And
How do you think he would do today?
But he's now in this day and age, I think Holmes is now given the credit he deserves.
I have him in the top 5, and I think if he was around today, the Holmes, if in between the Norton fight and the Cooney fight, I think Tyson Fury would be hard, but I think he'd win. I have no doubt that he would beat Joshua and Deontay Wilder.
Well, speaking of Joshua, okay, the talk is July 23rd in Saudi Arabia. That's the talk that him and Usyk are going to have the rematch. And Anthony Joshua is moving on to a new trainer, Robert Garcia. I find from experience, Frank, when a top-of-the-line fighter suffers a defeat, they tend to make a switch in head trainers a lot of the time. And usually it might have an immediate impact positively if they're fighting a guy who's not quite on their level right after and everything is all happy. But then when they fight a guy on their level the first time after that, the reality sets in. It makes no difference, the new trainer that they got.
Jack, I don't think it's going to make a difference in this fight. I think Joshua needs a psychologist more than a trainer. I think Joshua's body can beat Usyk's body, but I just don't know if he has the engine to drive it. And I can't see any case where, I don't care what Robert Garcia says between now and the fight, I can't see any scenario where I could pick Joshua to win because I just don't like his confidence. Maybe the Joshua that fought Klitschko, maybe he'd have a shot, but I don't think he beats Usyk this time. And it's going to be interesting to see because if he loses, what does Joshua do? He basically has to retire.
I'm not, there's more time to talk about. I picked Usyk in the first fight. I'm kind of holding off a little on making a prediction, believe it or not, because Joshua knows he has to take it to Usyk. He has to really rough him right off the bat. Okay, he has to fight differently.
Usyk knows that too.
But can Joshua sustain that? That's the question. Maybe he can get Usyk out within 6 rounds, the way his promoter Eddie Hearn says. But if he doesn't, is Joshua going to be around in rounds 9 and 10 and have a lot left in the tank? Or
he'll be gassed and losing confidence.
Or maybe he gets off to a big lead. It really comes on like gangbusters, wins for 5 of the first 6 rounds, Joshua, and just can maybe win 2 of the last 6 or hold Usyk off just enough. Even, let's say, wins 5 of the first 6 and knocks Usyk down, and then loses 5 of the last 6 and doesn't get knocked down and ekes out a fight.
Jack, if Joshua doesn't get Usyk out within the first 5, there's no chance he wins. If I was cheering Joshua, I would tell him, you have to go in and you have to get him out within 5 rounds or you are going to get beat. Now, what is worse, losing a decision or getting stopped, trying to stop him? But the longer that fight goes, the more Usyk will have time to process what Joshua's doing, how to refute it and encounter him. I think Joshua has to impose himself physically. That is his only chance to win. Usyk has more stamina. He's a better boxer. He's tougher mentally. And the only thing Joshua has is he has power and size. But if he can't apply them, I see no chance for him to win, Jack. And if he can't apply them in the first 5 rounds, what's he going to do in the last 7? He's got to get him early.
I'll say something that maybe Joshua doesn't have, but there's something we don't have. More time, as much as I'd love to have it, to continue talking boxing, Frank. So until next week, looking forward to next week's show.
Wait a second, Jack. We have 30 seconds left. I'm going to put you on the spot. Do Crawford and Spence fight this year? Yes or no?
No. How's that?
Okay, thank you. Yes, they'll fight this year, and they'll fight next. See you then.
The Hometown Foundation is excited to bring back the Dream Ride Experience, August 26th to the 28th at Connecticut's Farmington Polo Club. Join us in celebrating the accomplishments of our Dream Riders while enjoying live music, a car and motorcycle show, family fun zone, pet adoptions, canine demonstrations, the Fireman's Chili Cook-Off, and much, much more. Get your tickets today.
Okay, guys.
Jack, we'll talk during the week, okay?
I wouldn't be shocked if they fight Spence Crawford. It's only 50-50 to me.
I just wanted to get you on record.
Right. I'm guessing you beat Crawford. I'll be with you, Frank.